We're here with Vanessa Henri, and we're talking about the new privacy legislation, which is a very long name, so we're just going to keep calling it Bill C-27. So as you discussed, Vanessa, we find this legislation a little bit ambitious for various reasons, but mostly because it incorporates several acts within one act, and at the end, it may not be passed by Senate. So, I mean, it may be a roadblock, but it may not be. It could be a good thing. But I think we should talk about what the most important thing that is really missing from all these legislations, and that's the fact that privacy was not made a right. What are your thoughts about that?
Correct. So you have in Article 5 of the laws, it says that the objective is to recognize the right to privacy individual out of our personal information. But that right has not necessarily been thoroughly recognized in the law. Really goes quickly over this and what is really a right to privacy over personal information. Then the law goes on talking about consent, which makes people think, well, so my privacy is a consent. It's a business practice. So what is my right to privacy over personal information? I think that's a big elephant in the room, and that has not been clear. We have a right against unreasonable search, but definitely not a positive right to privacy into the Constitution like those in Quebec have. We don't have that at the federal level, even if mentioned in the law.
Yes, correct. And I think that's one of the failings of it. And I'm not quite sure why. I mean, I guess we'll have to go through maybe some Hansard notes there to figure it out. But in the meantime, yes, I think that the one biggest thing it's missing is not making privacy a right. And perhaps it will later, because I think that as things progress, especially with artificial intelligence, and we're going to see how companies get more and more into acquiring more information and using artificial intelligence, that I do think that privacy will have to be made a right. And if not for adults, at least for children, because I don't think that children completely understand when they go online and what they do, and they may not even understand the difference between an artificial image and one that is not. So at that point, there'll need to be some rights because there's definitely going to be abuses. So that being said, we've talked about what the biggest thing it's missing, but let's talk about some of the good things it has, because there's a lot of great things that this new bundle, I'm going to call it, legislation has, because we're going to have a tribunal now, and that's very different than what we had before. So let's talk about that.
Correct. So there's a number of things that is introduced into that law that is either a Canadian invention, and that's great. For example, we have international transfer that are not covered, but then we have introduced at least a notion of when we transfer the information to a service provider. So that wasn't very clear before. It was kind of all in the guidance and not into the law. We've introduced also this new concept of data-identified data versus anonymized data. So to sum it down and make it very simple, data-identified data, it's a little bit like you anonymize, but not with the same quality of anonymization. So there's a risk that it's going to be re-identified. So that distinction is a Canadian distinction that has already passed in Quebec. So we're well on the way to cover this. And not only that, we also introduced the notion of automated decision-making system. And in Canada, it's not just that it's doing its thing on its own. It can also be assisting somebody to make a decision. And that is a step in a different direction than what we have in the EU, because in the end, it was really easy to go around that provision by saying a human's operating it, so it's okay. That will not be possible with C-27, and that is a step in the right direction from what we currently have in the law in terms of using your personal data in an automated manner.
I agree. I think what's really important is the fact that the distinction was there, and we weren't really leaders in Canada. Like you said, you brought up the GDPR, which is in Europe, and of course there's a CPPA within California and the United States, and of course the United States has the new legislation coming up. But what really made us unique was, I think, that we separated these things between anonymized and segregated, desegregated. I think all these definitions for the everyday people may not be important, but I can assure you that they are important, because some information, even though it may be segregated or de-anonymized, it could still be found, backed, and traced you. And now we're having these types of rules and regulations that are governing the way businesses are doing and collecting information. The most important being is the mitigation of data, meaning that businesses can only allow a nominal amount of information that they collect, only that can be used for the purposes of their business, whereas before, it was a free-for-all. It was the Wild West. And but businesses could take as much as they needed and wanted in order to sell the services that they had. So that being said, we're about to go for a break. But Vanessa, Do you agree or disagree on that point?
I agree. I think it's great that we have the notion of consent. Yes, it's still there, but businesses have to show that there's still a legitimate purpose. So your
Yes.
factored consent that maybe is not informed will not be sufficient to pass the test. So there's a
Okay.
double standard. Very
Okay.
interesting.
Yes, thank you. And we'll be right back.